A lovely morning, Africa. Madzuka bwanji, bonjour. Well, today on GMA, we're talking about how to position yourself as an expert in the industry. And with me to talk that is Douglas. Good morning, Douglas.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you here
Great,
as well.
thank you so much.
So tell me, Douglas, what is it to position oneself as an expert in the industry?
Well, the reality is that most people work incredibly hard most of their lives and don't necessarily break even in their lifetime. And we're always taught that working hard is the way to get ahead. Well, I believe that working smart is the way to get ahead. And the difference there is that most people will simply spend years working agonizingly hard at what they do, but not really being seen or rewarded as much as what they should. And when you are seen as the industry expert, the pay scale changes, the remuneration changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how applicable is your teaching as regards to all professions?
Well, it does apply across the board. I mean, let's just take a very simple example. If you are a consultant and you walk into a business, but nobody's ever heard of you, in other words, you're not the industry expert, you'll do a week of hard work for them and hand in your bill, and it will have X number of zeros on the end. But if you happen to be Richard Branson, you come into the same company, you speak for half an hour, and they add 3 more zeros. Now, it's not because someone like Richard Branson has necessarily worked harder, it's because of the name Richard Branson.
Yes.
So just being seen as the industry expert is worth a lot of money to us. And that applies whether or not you are the head of a big corporation like Mr.
Yes.
Branson, or whether you're actually part of a corporation and working your way up through the ranks. The more you're perceived to be an expert, the more you are promoted and the better rewarded you become.
Wow, I can
Yeah.
already feel that. You're really a motivational speaker. So now, I wanted to find out in terms of elements, what are the elements or factors that one needs to have in order to position themselves as an industry expert?
It's an excellent question, and most people assume that to be an expert you just have to have the knowledge about what you do. But there are actually 2 parts missing to that.
Okay.
You have to have all 3 things working together.
Yes.
So the first one is the knowledge. You can't be an expert without knowing what you're on about.
Yes.
But the part that most people miss is the personality. And after having the personality added to the mix, you've also got to have publicity.
Yes.
The way I like to say it is that if you have all the knowledge but none of the personality, you're only a specialist. If you have all of the personality but none of the knowledge, you're a Kardashian. So you've got to have the 2 working together.
So knowledge and personality.
Yeah.
But how practical are these now?
Well, it's actually very easy to do. I mean, if you take, for example, in the motoring industry, motoring journalism, there are thousands of TV shows around the world that focus on cars. But whenever I stand up in front of audiences and say, what's the first name that springs to mind when you think car shows?
Yes.
Everybody says Jeremy Clarkson and Top Gear. Now, what is he doing differently? Does he know more about cars? I wouldn't say so. Is he a greater expert? Has he been around for longer? Nah. The answer is he's bringing personality to it.
Okay.
In the past, everybody would just talk about the facts and figures around cars. Clarkson started bringing in stories and humor and metaphors, and that made his industry come alive. And for that reason, we see him today as the leading expert in his domain.
Wow. So now, in terms of that, where other people have actually positioned themselves as industry expert, can one also learn, or how do you get to position yourself to do that?
Well, yes, I would say that the first thing is you've got to have the audacity to want to be an industry expert.
You have to have the audacity.
And basically, you've got to take it out there on a roadshow.
Okay.
Most people, by way of an example, are very uncomfortable speaking in public.
Yes.
In fact, they did a survey once in the States where they asked people, what is your #1 fear? And death came second. Public speaking was at the top of that list. Yeah.
Okay.
But public speaking is such a powerful way to take your message out there. Now, most people don't think of doing that. Even on the smallest scale, let's say, for example, that you're working for a large corporate company.
Yes.
It is incredibly powerful to be the person speaking in the boardroom meetings, the one addressing staff, the one running the meeting. Because if you're seen at the front of the room, you're perceived as the thought leader at that point in time. Now, as an entrepreneur, it also changes things for you. If you go to a networking meeting, you have to go and tap people on the shoulder one by one and introduce yourself.
Yes.
But if you go and speak at that meeting, people start coming to you. And that's the core idea in expert positioning. It's saying, rather than having to go out and meet people one by one, how do you get them to come to you? And that's the heart and soul of it.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah.
Now, does it take one to start this at an early stage, or you can actually, like now, I want to be, I want to position myself as an industry expert.
There are no time limits to it.
There are no
Absolutely
time
not.
limits.
No. No, in fact, you can start at any point in your life. And it really does just take that combination of 3 elements. You've got to have the industry knowledge.
Yes.
You've got to add your personality to it. Now, most people get afraid there because they think, well, I'm not as loud as Jeremy Clarkson, or I'm not as spectacular as Richard Branson. It doesn't matter. Take, for example, the cooking industry.
Yes.
There must be billions of people around the world who know, to a greater or lesser extent, how to cook. But when we think of the top named experts, we think of, say, Nigella Lawson or Gordon Ramsay, people like that. And all it is that these are people who have taken their personality and put it out there into the world. Now, there are also very quiet personalities, like Jamie Oliver, for example. He's not a big, loud, brash guy, but we do know his face, we have heard his voice, and for that reason, we think of him when we think of the world of cooking. He's not necessarily the best chef in the world, but he has got the personality, and he's taken it on tour.
So you just have to try it out.
You've got to try it out. Take what you know, take it on tour.
Out.
Yeah.
Lovely. Now, maybe already people want to get in touch with you. How do they do that?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is just through my website, which is my name. It's douglaskruger.co.za. And while they're there, have a look at some of the articles on expert positioning.
All right.
I've taken all of the knowledge that I have on how to practically do it in your industry, and I've turned it into articles. There are articles on how to speak well, how to lead your industry, how to be a thought leader, and it's all for free. And in fact, that's one of the points for becoming an expert. Give away your knowledge. Yes, give them a reason to want to follow you.
Well, Douglas, thanks for having you in the studio.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Africa, that's what I had for you this morning with Douglas talking about how to position yourself as an expert in the industry that you're in. Well, from me, Derek, it's goodbye, and it's back to Shayla and Tourette's.
Well, that was very insightful. A big thank you to Douglas coming through to our studio, telling us more about being an expert, or rather how to see yourself as an expert in the industry that you find yourself in. Thank you for that.
Well, if you want more information about this, send us an email, gma@planetimage.co.za. Also on Facebook, we are Good Morning Africa. And keep your tweets coming in. That is GMA_African Magic. Without said, let's take some more studio performance.